Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first set of panelists for today's session. I'd like to ask Father Czar first. You mentioned in your presentation about the impact of politics in philanthropy. Can you elaborate on it, or what's the connection? Is there a connection between politics and philanthropy?
Good morning. Relationship between politics and philanthropy, yes. Well, first and foremost, because certain interests, political interests, overlap with philanthropic interests. Okay, that's why politicians through different state or government organizations and agencies, they try to provide practically people with what they need, social needs, especially material needs, which is also one of the things that we philanthropists are trying to do. So in one way or another, we try to respond to people's needs in terms of economic needs. We try to find solutions to problems of poverty, unemployment, material crisis, etc. No? And but I also pointed out in my presentation that what the government is doing does not suffice. So we still need the help of good-hearted individuals and groups to complete and somewhat complement what the government or any government organization is already doing to help people. So that's the first point of contact that I can see between politics and philanthropy. There are many things that certain interests that we have in common, okay? Second is that we have to admit the fact that politics plays a crucial role in social development of peoples. First and foremost, because politicians are the ones determining where the national budget goes. And we cannot do much without money, okay? So while philanthropies or donors can work independently of any political association or affiliation, some of our donors may be altogether uninterested in any political matters, okay? The fact remains that money plays a crucial role in the activities both of politics and philanthropy, okay? I pointed out in my talk today that I think what we can do right now as private groups or individuals is that we try to find a way of connecting with the political mechanisms of our respective countries. That's one thing that we should do. We should try to get the attention of our politicians, see to it that our interest, people's interests and needs are put on their political agenda and become part of their political priorities. So respectively, they would come up with the corresponding legal actions aside from the financial allotment necessary in order to really help people out in their different crisis situations. I know many of us are quite, let's say, we don't trust our politicians that much. I speak of Asia in general, in the Philippines in particular, no? Because sometimes we have a very negative impressions of our politicians. We say politicians, instead of asking people, they prioritize their own interests, okay? So sometimes they themselves get involved in certain corrupt practices. So we don't know practically where the public money goes. Instead of investing all that money into people's needs, politicians tend to prioritize their own needs. So we have quite a negative image of our politicians, no? But the fact remains that we need politicians. We need their help. We need to collaborate with them. We need to get them as much as possible involved in our philanthropic activities also, and constantly call their attentions to the real needs of the people, not just the needs they imagine people need to cover up their own personal interests, okay? And last thing is, I think as private individuals, one good way of calling our politicians' attention is by choosing the right people to put in position during time of elections. I mentioned that for this year, 2024, around 40 elections are scheduled to take place in Asia. And we would decide on the people who would put in position, okay? So needless to say, it would be necessary for us to think very well about their agenda, to see to it that we choose the right politicians, the right people who really have a sincere interest in the well-being of our people, okay? So let's be wise, let us practice exercise our right to vote, the right politicians, and I think that's one way of really promoting our philanthropic interests with the help of our politicians.
Thank you, Father Czar. Would you like to add to that, Dr. Glenda and Miss Hannah, in your journey with Red Cross also?
I'd like to highlight politics on the realm of leadership, because I think leadership, to add to Father Czar's focus on government, I'd like to highlight the leaders in the room. In every different organizations, there's always political power dynamics as well. And to better relate the authority we have in leadership has to step up from your acceptance of being a leader and how your agenda as a leader would also go down to the needs of the community. And I think philanthropy talks about the common ground, which is love for humanity. I so believe that, for example, in the private sector on politics and philanthropy, for example, Rotary has its leadership structure as well, and whatever would be the focus of governor of this area is respected. However, there is this leadership call to also move beyond power dynamics, to make politics and philanthropy not just in government, but also much more applicable in the organizations of where you are. Because everyone has leadership structures as well, whether especially very highlighting the church. The dynamics is clear, but when we embrace agenda and philanthropy, I would say that the pressing problems should be presented on the ground, and so people would know the urgency of making decisions that would lead to solve problems as well. Now, government is in place and there are systems in government that may be corrupted, but there are also systems in government that are purely also doing so well. How do you map making the strength of the force for good higher and amplified so that the others who are at a loss maybe can be drawn to the right direction? And I think leadership organizations like AVPN, Rotary, Spring Rain Global, what Hannah was also sharing about their organization, should take the lead that after all, it can be done. And this politics and this gap between the sources of funds from government and will shut up if the problems in the world will become worse. At the end of the day, we have to amplify the voice of what is needed. And if we can't change, my mantra also is not what the government can do for me, but it's what I can do for the government if I have to take that power and role. So I encourage leaders in this room that if you have the influence, then do the influence yourself. If you can influence government, if you can influence policies, if you can influence, then it will begin from there. There is this problem, there is this recognition, but there's also this solution. And it takes leaders like in this room, nurture that change you want to change, for philanthropy to marry public and private partnerships and make those resources really move to where it should be needed. And I think the change has to start from us as well, and from those who are in government here in this room. You could also be the voice to reach that out to the sector that has the resources available.
Thank you. So you've talked about politics driving philanthropy. I wanted to add a thought related to politics, which is media. Media drives philanthropy. And the more mediatized crisis of our time inevitably attracts more funding. We see more of Gaza, more of Syria on the news, and not so much of Yemen or Central African Republic, for example, on the news. But the needs are just as valid and just as urgent. So what I would say to funders in the room, come alongside the organization that you choose to support. Think about ways in which you could broaden your support, not just to project funding, but to multi-year commitments, such that the organization that you're supporting has the capacity to think long-term and not to be kind of burdened by the responsibility of needing to keep looking for funds. That's what I'd say to funders. And for implementing organizations, really cherish those relationships, nurture each one, bring them closer to you, be good about presenting your impact to them, such that they will stay with you for the long term and you can count on them, and they will consider you their partner of choice for any crisis that comes in the future.
Thank you so much. I'd like to address this. This comes from different persons, but it is about the SDGs. It is directed to Dr. Glenda. Number one is, what are the SRG strategic plans for implementing SDG 2030? And the second one is, the SDG 15-year timeframe is about to end by 2030. How can us philanthropic development organizations, particularly in Asian countries, navigate to primary challenges in achieving the goals given the inequalities and economic disparities? So it is about achieving the SDGs by 2030.
Okay, so I think for Spring Rain Global Ecosystem, we have to touch base on where we are. And the only way to do that is to strengthen our data mapping, our capacity to map the data of where we are, so we understand what are the gaps in going there. It's a more data-driven approach that we will be doing right now. And the next 3 days, there will be sessions on impact measurement, because when they say measuring UN, it's not just about doing good, but it's documenting what are we doing to improve that we're really addressing the gap. And there's a lot of good going on in Asia, but still the record is not clear. Even the race to net zero is not yet even measured at UN level. For the European Chamber has to apply a UN accelerator to measure where are we in our race to net zero. A lot of people are already doing renewable energy, waste to whatever, but how do we measure that? We'll only streamline on data. But it's not just about data, it's about the capacity to gather data, and the capacity to also measure the gaps and do analysis so that all our strategies will not be put to waste. And with the common ground of where Spring Rain Global is in the hybrid complexity of our members in our ecosystem, I think what we can provide on the table from the data would attract more access to capital. Right capital, not just capital. And when you talk about capital, you talk about human capital, you talk about financial capital, you talk about the right infrastructure to enable success, because you may be in an infrastructure that will pull you down and not going anywhere. So all this will have to be mapped year after year so that the relationship between the funders and the implementers will be strengthened and the gap will not take farther, and that we will know that we're progressing and getting there. Unless we do have the right data to work with, there's nothing to measure. However, with Spring Rain's trust on the members of our ecosystem, especially the funders network, we're strengthening our capacity building, because we know that we don't have to ask people to say, hey, support us. We just have to show the data that we're capable of implementing all these gaps if only more resources will be tailored to the community on the ground. And I think, Anne, even if the funders are all there, without the community, there will be nothing to achieve in the holistic report of where we are going. It takes the community to make it visible and real in the eyes of the funders that something is going on and something has to be solved. And in the capacity building thrust of Spring Rain, we are highly emphasizing this to the funders as well, that aside from funding programs, it's also a focus that you may also have to look at capacity and fund that so that organizations can scale and that there will be more ripple effect of the agenda that we're trying to contribute for the global reach.
Agree. I definitely concur. Thank you. To Ms. Hannah, if Asia is having maximum number of billionaires, what is their approach towards philanthropy?
It's a really good question. There's a lot of potential, but the phase that we are in now is really in the early stages, the nascent part of the industry. What they typically do now is give to causes close to home. And when we look at the top 3 thematics that they are interested in, education is right at the top, followed by health, and the third is poverty alleviation. So you can see already in the thematics that it's kind of classic in terms of the things that they'd like to support. And then in terms of characteristics of Asian philanthropy, the first one is really where the philanthropic capital is very much passed through their business interests. So this could come through CSR initiatives from their corporation or their foundations that come through. They're very unlikely to set up kind of Western-style foundations that give 100% grants. And then the second part about Asian-style philanthropy is that the large majority of families that have philanthropic vehicles design and implement the programs on their own. They really want to have that control over it. And the last one, which really differs to Western ideas of philanthropy, is the trust and the complementary role that they take alongside the government. So initiatives that are channeled through philanthropic support really come through and come alongside what the government wants to do. So those three things are distinct. But I think it is an exciting time. I think gatherings like this and exchange of ideas really help propel the industry forward, and I think it's only a matter of time that the industry matures to its full potential.
Thank you. There is a statement that that one of the audience wants you to comment. My impression from the talks is that the better organized a group is, translates to greater likelihood to get funding. Please comment. Yeah, starting with Father Zar.
Well, every time I hear people talk about philanthropy, about different advocacies, different needs, I try to put myself in the part of possible donor, okay? Because one thing that I really would like to look for before I shell out any amount, be it small or big, is transparency, clarity in vision, in structure, organization. Okay, so institutions asking for donations that possess those qualities would more easily catch my attention because I would know exactly where my money would go, how my money would be used, how it would be managed, and I'm sure that there would be a higher level of accountability. So the better organized, the more transparent, the clearer an organization is as far as its advocacies are concerned, I think that organization would have a higher chance of attracting people's attention and eventually getting more donors.
Dr. Glenda?
The advocacy that you're supporting attracts funders, but it is your structure that will keep them going with you. Even if you have the simplest project, people give. But what we want to do is to make them keep giving. And it is the organized, institutionalized structure that you have that will allow these funders to partner and not just give. Your causes are already amazing, but it's not enough. You have to be organized to ensure that more partnerships and long-term engagements will happen, and it will just attract and fall in its place.
Ms. Hannah?
Yes, I think you've both made really good points, and I think receiving a gift is only one part of the process. The other part is really being steward of a gift, to come back to your partner and say, here's what we've done with your money, This is how we've delivered. This is how we've been accountable. And please come back to partner with us for next time. That's a business process that needs to be in place, and it needs to work well, 100 times over well. So it can't just work one-off, because that's really how you lose supporters along the way. So totally agree.
Thank you. This is for Father Czar, but I also like you to comment. There are two questions. I'll mix it into one. It is also a reality that there is corruption among foundations. Some are not genuine in their advocacies and are bogus. How can we prevent this? That is number one. Number two, how to empower voters, especially those whose votes are for sale during election period that leads them to greater slavery of poverty and at the mercy of the powerful. Father Czar.
Okay, let me start with the second question, which is unfortunately a very sad reality that we have to deal with, especially here in Asia, no? Where because of the economic situation of voters, of people, it's quite easy to buy them, okay, to solicit their votes, and then it becomes a vicious circle. Because the moment you sell your vote to a certain candidate and you put a person who is not honestly interested in the well-being of the people, then you know how the situation would end. It's a very sad situation, and that is where integrity, principles, values really play a crucial role. I think in philanthropy, we must not talk only about certain policies, mechanisms, structures, procedures, how to set up PDOs, etc. No? I think one good thing that we're doing in philanthropy is also by bringing about education, proper teaching people how to think very well in terms of value formation, so that they will be properly guided in every action that they take. Specifically, talking about political election, I think philanthropies or philanthropic organizations can help people a lot develop critical thinking and develop the capacity to discern which things are really more important that would guide them in choosing their leaders. People would be more principled, would be more value imbued, would be more steadfast. They would not be easily tempted to just sell their vote in exchange for money. Okay, we just have to start from somewhere. And one thing that we should really and definitely avoid at all costs is that of being a part of the same vicious circle over and over again. Because unless we are willing to stand firm and to uphold our high morals and principles and values and say no to any form of corruption, then I think we would never be able to free ourselves from that vicious circle which we find in politics.
Madam?
It's a systemic issue, so it demands a systemic solution. So I would say that we all have to be more conscious about it on what we're able to influence and begin from there. Election, and I still believe that your advocacies would change the system, because the more you support quality access to education, the more you educate people that there's a lot of livelihood programs going on independently. Your advocacies, if you put it right in the proper programs, will change the way people think about depending on others for their survival. That's how people have to adapt to where am I loyal to. It's my life. They fed me, therefore I follow them. But at the end of the day, if we empower dignity among every individual, they will then say, I am dignified to do what I had to do, and I should choose the right organizations that I have to be connected with. However, also, we all have to play a role on not just doing this because election is happening. It should be a constant reminder of ourselves. We should not be reactive and do education because there's election. It should be already in our DNA. Practice the right political values in our own individual organizations where we are. I still believe that systems change people. And if we put in the right system, it will allow you to behave differently. But no one can change from afar. It would be too hard. But if we start from within, it will be doable, it duplicates, it makes life better, and that starts the change in the organization where you are actually doing. And it's a challenge, but it will continue to change when we are conscious about it. And I think that's my stand for it. I also don't like to think of things that's so hard to make it happen. I mean, it's too wishful thinking. I'd rather want to go for things that would allow us to do because it's within our influence. So think about this, not because there's election that we do it. It's a way of life. It's in our DNA to be dignified from within. Yeah.
Ms. Hannah?
I think they've answered it really well. I have nothing to add to this one.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I would like to read it raw, and I'd like to ask you in English. Nganong lisod man himuon ang collaboration among NGOs, faith-based organization, and corporation? Why is it hard for collaboration amongst NGOs, faith-based organizations, and corporation?
Yeah, I think it can be hard at the beginning. Each organization may need to compromise on some of their reporting or their processes to put things in a straight line. But I think in the long term, it'll pay off, particularly for big crises of our time. We need people to come together. And the impact of philanthropy is really amplified if we come together across sectors and even across different industries. So definitely painful at the beginning, but there are many examples where we've seen it worth the pain.
Correct. Agree, Madam?
And an environment has to be enabled for everyone to convene. Unless there's no convening, there's no way of connecting. We will still be working in silos. I agree with Hannah that it's kind of hard at the onset. In Spring Rain, we did not imagine that faith-based organization can come together from different congregations, and now funders are seeing you all, and now people are becoming, not because of anything, but because we just enabled. And I think you have to continue enabling among yourselves conversations like this. We're taking the lead to let you know that platforms like this works. And it has to begin from there and then grow to be able to continue more collaboration and conversation. It's impossible that you wait, but you have to make the conversation happen on the table.
Father Zar?
I think the question, why is it hard to...
For NGOs to collaborate and corporations and faith-based?
Well, the fact remains that every group of people, every institution for that matter, made of human beings, fall under the sway of certain religious convictions. They have certain faith beliefs, no? And sometimes we have to admit the fact that there are certain beliefs, religious beliefs, faith convictions that we have that sometimes are not really conducive to the promotion of certain philanthropic activities. Okay? In fact, I think I mentioned this in passing during my talk that one of the causes, for example, of discrimination of women in certain parts of the country have very strong religious foundations. They are founded on certain beliefs, and that is a purely religious cultural issue. I think when it comes to philanthropy, we must learn how to rise above that level of religious diversity. We must be able to encourage everybody, independently of one's faith, one's religious conviction, to focus more on what humanity really needs, what people have in common, rather than what separates them. Okay? Because if we allow certain faiths, certain religions to get in the way of our philanthropic activities, that could be quite problematic. It's the same thing that we're doing when we talk about interreligious dialogue. Okay, we focus more on what we have in common, what can unite us, rather than what can separate us. And I think we are capable of identifying what are the common values that even different religions share. Okay, that's a good starting point, no? So let's not allow certain religious beliefs and faith interests to get in the way of our philanthropic activities.
Agree, Father. Even if the same faith but different charism, still it's hard to collaborate. Yeah, thank you. This one is for Dr. Glenda. Can you please elaborate or give us a clear picture of the $1 billion challenge declared last year? What projects were already funded?
It demands a transformative thought leader thinking in that line. But last year, I remembered, but the speaker, Mr. Vincent K.A. Lim, will be sharing about that next year. But to declare a 1 billion funding is not about having the 1 billion fund the next month. Agree? To declare a 1 billion funding was telling that our ecosystem in the next 7 years have huge billions of funding requirements. And to get there, it's not about the money per se, but it's the journey going out there. So as far as how we define that declaration, it was a commitment among different stakeholders that we are ready to move this forward. And I think we have begun with our Singapore network moving forward with the Springwing Global Foundation in setting up the capacity building fund. Because it's easier to ask for money, but it's not that easy to make your organizational capacity capable of doing so. Don't be in a hurry of the money. Go back to your organization and think, are you capable of doing that? Are there organizations mapping that you have done so far? Only a few PDOs, I think, have taken the stride to work and move forward, to take that journey. However, the rest of the others are trying to organize themselves as well, because it's not just about where's the money, but it's about how is your organization able to take in the funding. We're doing a lot of these steps moving forward on preparing the ground. And the preparation of the ground entailed a lot of different collaborations. And we've done with the collaborations from ABPN to the European Chamber to the WINGS network and the GIIN that we had mapped to share. But the 1 billion is not even enough to cover all our needs. Our funding needs is about 3.5 billion, actually, to be honest. But we saw that it takes a seed of a fund to set up the organization first before you even have to get to where you need to be. Because it's not just a one-time support, but it's a circular kind of movement that we're taking collaborations on the ground. So where are we? We've done with identifying the networks that would put us together, those pledges that will put the acts together on the initial capacity building support, and we'll kick off from there on who are the organizations that will be ready to take into the next level. Few PDOs will be ready to move after July. The other PDOs are still working on their organizational structure to get them ready as well. But we're moving, just so you know. That declaration has been moved. And Vincent K.A. Lim will be here also to share more about where are we in that journey.
Yeah, while you're at it already, the next question is related to that. How can capacity building move to scale funders to support SRG to the next level? I think you mentioned it, but you want to put emphasis on that.
I think we've highlighted already to the funders that more than just funding the programs, we want the funders to strengthen the internal organization, which is basically the important tool or the important direction to make sure that you will not fail when you continuously establish more partners on the ground.
Thank you, Madam. In the interest of time, I'd like to read this last question. This is from the Diocese of Kannur. Is Kannur? This is directed to Father Zar. when you look at some of the demographic data, about 1/4 of the world's young population is there in India now. I'll follow that this young grant needs international competence to take up some of the assignments in various parts of the world. Can we think of some special emphasis in empowering this quarter of the world's young in our involvements? Thank you. Can you think of some special emphasis in empowering the youth, the 1/4 that was stated earlier?
I have a very conservative way of looking at things, so I perfectly agree with Mara's presentation when she mentioned that among the advocacies, on the top of the list is always education. And I still believe in the power of education. I think that's where things should begin. So we should be really investing more and more in education, because education is really the key, the access that will enable us to develop ourselves, different aspects of human life, to solve many social problems, etc. No? So I think among the advocacy that I would really put on the top of the list, there will always be education.
Thank you, Father Zar. Would you like to comment on that, Madam? Okay, thank you. Okay, I will take this as the last question. The predicament of some foundations, especially when led by popular, prominent individuals, is that possible donors think or have the impression that we don't need any more their support. How do you think can we entice them and convince them that we still need them? How can we separate the personalities from the real advocacy to be able to gain support?
Show the data.
Agree.
Nothing more, nothing less. That will show the gaps. And they will read between the lines.
Yeah. Thank you. Calling once. Thank you so much. That ends our, but before that, sorry, I'd like to ask you for your key takeaway regarding your sharing for this morning. Father? Ms. Hannah, your key takeaway for your sharing, please.
Maybe just one. I think, this is my first time with this group here, but it's really impressive, the energy and the ideas that are coming from this group, and just the presentations that we've had today. I guess to say, I work for a global humanitarian organization. Maybe some challenges are different to what all of you experience in your different lives and the roles that you're trying to do here. But just to say, we're all trying to solve the challenges of our time, so we're all walking in the same direction. So congratulations to all of you for pushing ahead, and I'm really delighted to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Hannah. Dr. Glenda?
Keep nurturing the environment that will allow you to become the best version of yourself. The solutions are in our hands, and if we collaborate and continue to be the thought leaders we are, then it will take us to greater heights. Allow this occasion to open your mind and be logical in the way we do things, but also put some point of the heart and drive collaboration in this 3-day conference. So thank you for your attention and active participation.
Father Zar?
Okay, keep your feet on the ground. Keep your eyes open. Keep your mind open, but keep your heart even more open. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Zar. Thank you so much, everyone. It is now time to give the plaque of appreciation to our speakers. May I call Engineer Mark Anthony Antonio, the CEO of